but you know,
But
but I
it
do.
is, you're collecting stories, so you're
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
it.
yeah.
just yeah, so you're doing it.
Yeah, well, no, being but like, it's weird because being a poet allows me to be like everything. So like, yeah,
Right.
yeah, it's pseudo ethnographer, pseudo, like, yeah,
No, a researcher,
pseudo researcher, pseudo
right?
folklorist,
Archivist.
pseudo archivist,
Right.
pseudo, and then but
Right.
yet what I produce 9 times out of 10 is better than the professionals. And we are live.
But it's not a lie though, okay? It's not a
Yeah, it's not a
lie.
lie. No, it isn't.
No, no,
Yeah.
it's not. I see no lies told. Okay.
So we're live, joined this hour by Dr. Tina Wright. Very, very excited. She is a professor as well as she's a great organizer on the campuses, outside of the campuses, community organizer, just a great intellectual author. Um, really, really, really excited to have you this hour, Tina. So before we get started,
Sure. Thank you,
uh,
Matt, for having me. I appreciate you, doing what you've been doing. These interviews are, important part of history. So love it.
thank you, thank you. So before we get started, though, before we get started talking about the 360 project, before we get to the Urban Teachers Network, before we get to Hip Hop Congress, all these incredible things you're involved with. Before we get to any of that, can you tell us how did you tell us about the road to becoming a professor? I mean, tell us about your educational journey?
Okay, well, that'll be interesting. Look, because it changed. Like, I mean, I think most people it does change. I grew up in Newport News, Hampton, Newport News, Virginia, VA, two up, two down all day, and came out here for college to go to UCLA, and was actually coming to do film, actually kind of documentary type film. And so then while I was there as a comm studies media person, I also started taking a lot of AFAM, Afro American Studies classes, sociology emphasis, and really got into that a lot. Also on campus then was big, apartheid movement stuff going on, so got involved with that a little bit as well. And I just kind of shifted to more social justice type stuff. When I got out of undergrad, I started teaching for a while, K-12. I taught at Compton Unified and Paramount Unified, which is right next to Compton, for about maybe about 4 years. Ended up teaching. I kept changing grades. I started like first, then went to third, then went to fourth, then went to middle school. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna kill somebody's kid, so let me get out here. Let me not catch a case. So I went back to grad school, and actually went there for urban education issues because of my experience as a teacher. I was really interested in education, and while there at UC Irvine, which was torture in of itself, I started kind of looking to my culture, hip hop culture, as a research entity, and looking at hip hop history and using it in education, and started my hip hop class there back in like 2001. And that took me really into much more kind of hip hop ed cultural type stuff. And so I was in the sociology program there, and my dissertation was actually on education. It had to do with structural interaction, social network analysis stuff of education. But while I was there, I also started getting into hip hop. So that's where I started. Taught there for a while, even after I finished up the program. Also taught at Cal State Long Beach, taught a little bit at Orange Coast College. I taught sociology and a lot of AFAM classes, so African American political thought, African American history. And then about 12, 13 years ago, I came out to Southwest. And that's where I've been full time ever since, teaching sociology. And there I teach intro, I teach social problems, I teach race and ethnic relations. I teach also social justice studies class now, and my hip hop class. So using hip hop as a lens to kind of deconstruct issues in society.
Yeah. So you say in 2001 you began kind of work with writing on hip hop. How was
Mhm.
that received at UC Irvine? I mean, nowadays like everyone, it's seen as like
Right,
it's popular. I don't want to say trendy because that makes it sound like I'm
r-
being dismissive, but it's
right,
popular. It's people are interested. But
right.
2001, what was the scene like?
So it was part of kind of a second year paper, which would be similar to kind of a master's thesis type thing. And in my second year in the program, and at that time, from what I can remember, there was only a couple other classes. There was one up in Berkeley on Tupac, and kind of an English poetry type class, if I remember correctly. And then Howard University, I think, had a hip hop based class, but there weren't many. And so, Irvine being Irvine, it wasn't really received well, but I was able to offer it. And then it was very popular with the student body. So, I was able to get classes of 100 every single quarter. And, that made them happy. So then, yeah, it was, once I offered it the first time, and AFAM was supportive too. So I kind of offered it as a dual class, sociology and African American studies. And once they saw how popular it was with the student body, then they continued it. And then after that, I think the AFAM department, brought on someone that also was of a hip hop education background for full time. But it was early on. So we were, one of the first folks kind of doing it at that university level. There might have been a handful more, but those were the big programs that I remember.
Yeah. Another thing you mentioned in that was this question of social network analysis. This was kind of your study. I think when most people these days hear social network, they think of like social media, right? But
Mm-hmm.
when you were doing this was not that was not at all what you meant by that. And it's still not what you mean by it. Okay, so can you explain to us what social network analysis is?
Yeah, so I did have the benefit of meeting and working under the tutelage of Lynn Freeman, who's kind of one of the, big forefathers in social network analysis, has his own program, or the, program that they did in order to graph social network analysis. But basically it's the structure of interaction, the structure of communication, people as kind of, um, you know, nodes in a system. So it kind of shows you the structure of interaction. And I mean, social media like Facebook, they use those things. So when you see people pop up on your, you should friend this person, they've done some kind of, social network analysis of why they think these people and so on. So it is kind of the idea behind it, but really it is kind of the math of social structure. It's more of a methodology, although there are theories in it as well, to really map the structure of interaction, of social interaction. So for a lot of early sociologists, that was, kind of what sociology should be, about our connections, about who's connected to who, and, what structure that creates. And, if I know something and you need that information, how I get it to you, or if there's someone in between us and they know you and I, that type of thing. So it's really showing how our interactions create micro level social structure.
Yeah. So you're not. I mean, from the interactions we've had and working together now and again,
Mm-hmm.
I know you're not the type of person to study something just to study something, right? So you study this sort of thing with a purpose, right? So I think I would like to ask you now a little bit um, about the 360 project,
Sure,
and we'll come back,
sure.
and then we'll talk about some other stuff, and then we'll come back to what's next.
Okay.
But yeah, but can you tell us a little about the 360 project?
I mean, it is related. It's based
Yeah.
on kind of, my studies in social network analysis. And I'll just touch on my dissertation a little bit at first. But what was interesting to me was I was at a middle school, Long Beach area, and you could see basically how the same group of students go, 50 yards from one class to another, and was just totally different experiences, right? So when folks be like, oh, you can't teach kids that, this, and that, it's just really not true. It just depends on what kind of microstructure is set up. And so even with just one person, the teacher being the change of that network, of that, social network, it created a big difference on how communication happened, how things were able to, the interactions in the classroom, how students felt about their teachers, that type of thing. So that's kind of what led me to really be more intentional, or think more intentionally about our interactions, the people we know, human capital, if you will, understanding kind of how structure is formed from the ground up. And that took me to the 360 project. And basically, it's a community sustainability project. It's being much more intentional about the things that the people that we deal with, understanding their roles in our lives, understanding how, communication can get messed up through noise if you have too much going on, and just being much more intentional about your network. And network, by definition, is it's people connected by weak ties, right? So anything can happen between folks. Like if you think of, oh, you want to go out and network, you might meet someone and you might not never talk to them again. This being much more intentional about those relationships, about social relationships, and so on. And so, 360 is really just the idea of kind of concentric circles, where survival, is obviously critical, and having a 360 around you that you can survive with. So hopefully that means your family, close friends, but a lot of people don't have that. They might have to look somewhere else. And then going outside from there, what kind of community resources you can use, what kind of businesses you should support and not support, that type of thing. Where are you getting your education from? Where are you getting your media from? And just being very much more intentional about what you, how you structure your life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's yeah, and I want to return to that and talk about the book coming out, and the directions you take,
Right.
what you just described. But before that, tell us a little about Southwest. I mean, tell us about the campus and tell us about, your role there.
So I've been there since 2008. Love Southwest. It's part of the LACCD Community College District, which is, I think, the largest community college district in the country. So has a lot of political weight. I've been critical of the district as well as the campus for lots of mismanagement, not talking like they put students first and not always do. So I'm not maybe the most popular faculty leader on campus because I speak up quite a bit, but I do that. So since I've been there, I've been curriculum chair. I was work environment chair for a few years. I had to take a grievance to the district that went to arbitration that now is in court for, poor work environment conditions. Work environment chair is a union position. And just speaking up, and holding people's feet to the fire, holding folks accountable for, the service that they should be giving the students. We have a lot of good students there. A lot of students need Southwest in order to, find a way out of a lot of issues of poverty and so on in the area. We serve obviously mostly working poor folks. And, a lot of what the students say is, Southwest campuses like that are a license, but a lot of them get issues around poor mismanagement, not getting their financial aid 8 weeks into the semester, that type of thing. Books not in the bookstore, campus restrooms not clean, just things that, I know other campus students in other areas probably would not have to deal with, so just kind of the structure, the racialization of and class-based inequities that folks continue instead of really try to change structurally. Yeah. But other than that, I do like Southwest. Other than that, I'm glad I'm there. I know I couldn't be on too many other campuses. I'll put it that way. I work with a lot of Black, brown folks. That's how I like it. I don't really want to be, in, which comes back to intentionality, right? So it's important. I'm glad to be, paid by the public, state employee, if you will. And, so I do like a lot about it. I just know we could do better.
Yeah. So tell us about your work with Hip Hop Congress.
So probably when I was in Irvine as a graduate student is when Hip Hop Congress came to, got on my radar. And I'm not really even sure how, but Shamako Noble was one of the co-founders, Rial the other. I think they came up to UC Irvine to do something or on some type of panel. And that's how it got started. And we started a chapter at UC Irvine at the time I was there. And so that was my initial, introduction, which probably was somewhere around 2001 as well. And it might have been something about my hip hop class and, a connection, brought their names to my attention. I don't really remember, but we started a chapter there. I've continued with them for a long time. I'm, one of the board members now. Just really appreciate the network aspect of Hip Hop Congress, where it connects folks, artists, as well as students and folks that want to use hip hop and culture for social action and creativity that connects them across the country. So there's, can be chapters on any campus or in any community, really. And all the chapters are kind of autonomous, do their own thing, but, under a large national umbrella. So regionally, from place to place, they might be a little bit different. But yeah, just always bigging up hip hop and putting hip hop in, the center of anything happening. And so, yeah, I'm one of, a number of board members on that still. Ramen Jamal is now the exec director of it, and he's doing some big things. And one of the things he's doing is setting up a platform and for, Hip Hop Congress members, artists, and so on. And that's, part of 360 is to invest in the things that, really support us and divest from others. And there's a lot of things that, structurally we can't divest from, like this internet we're on and stuff like that, and like platforms like that. But we need to start thinking in those terms, like when, when Facebooks and all don't serve us well, will we have our own thing we can do, and so on. And so these are the type of things that, in 360, we need to start thinking about building as well. And also just working much more cooperatively, moving away from kind of the system as it is and start supporting and building cooperatives, worker cooperatives, housing cooperatives, platform cooperatives. So I've been doing a lot of studying and research on that in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's, we're all connected in so many different ways, but like all our connections are mitigated, and they're kind of, I don't know the word, they're mitigated.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Well, they're mitigated by people and forces that, and I wouldn't say they're just forces, because like that means that there's no people behind them. Eventually there's a person behind it, but mitigated by people we will never know, and we'll never meet, and who will profit off our interactions in ways that we're
and they are. And I'm glad you're doing this, and you're doing it for for the public and a public university or whatever. But a lot of Facebook and Twitter and all of them making their money off of our stories and our interactions, and that's their model. That's how they are getting people on it, is by basically everything that we do and control. And so we have to be really understanding of that, and that's part of the social network analysis thing. And you do have folks that are, really, as you well know, it's about power, and so 360 in a lot of ways I talk about in the book is thinking of power as control. What do you control? What don't you control? And moving much more, as much as you can, towards controlling intentionally as much as you can in your life, and then being real honest about what you don't, and having possible contingency plans. Okay.
Yeah. Contingency
Yeah.
plans upon interacting. Yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
very, that's for sure. I don't want to get into the 360
Mhm.
project. I want to get into the book coming out, all that. But before that, I want to ask you about, so what kind of events have Hip Hop Congress put on there at Southwest?
What kind of what? Oh, events?
At Southwest.
So yeah, so when I came to Southwest, I started a chapter there under you know their campus clubs. I'm the advisor of the Southwest one, and that was started pretty early. I think I was there in 2008, so I think the chapter of Hip Hop Congress started there, and we did like ciphers, performance events, open mics. And then when I do other things, like some of the stuff that you've come and supported and performed at, like our annual May Day things, Hip Hop Congress is usually a sponsor or co-sponsor of that, and providing a lot of the art for it. And so we've done different performances. We brought a couple people out. We try to highlight the artists on campus, the MCs and others on campus. This last couple years, I would say, haven't been as active. Let me shout out really a couple of the big. Michael Million was the first chapter head president at Southwest. He did a phenomenal job. Antoine Banks after him did a phenomenal job. We haven't been able to build as well since, but we're going to work on it if and when, I guess, we ever get back on campus. Yeah, so basically just to look at the hip hop folks on campus, support the artists on campus, giving them a venue to express themselves, and then also if we have other topics like a social justice topic or something like that, then have them as the artists for it.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about the Urban Teachers Network and your involvement in that?
Yeah, so it actually started under Hip Hop Congress. It was really the education platform for Hip Hop Congress. And then I just moved it into a space of like charity. So it's a public charity trust, first and foremost, which raises money to help artists, community artists, and community activists and organizations that use hip hop education or use arts in social justice work. So, twice a year we give out awards, also scholarships to what we call student service students that do community service through the same things like using art, community activists, that type of thing. And then it's a network of, urban arts educators so that we can, if folks need to meet someone to, do some kind of event or whatever, we go to our network, just kind of like Hip Hop Congress does. But yeah. I did, in a few years ago, maybe about 4 years ago, I made an official 501c3. And really it was because I'm around organizers so much and I know how much they stay broke. And I was trying to figure out a way to like support organizers more, especially cultural organizers. And that's really the purpose of UTN.
Yeah. Okay, so let's finally get to the 360 project and the book and the kind of the contents of it. I mean, so what is this book all about? I know you have a book coming out, so tell us about it.
So title is 360, A Blueprint to Black Self-Determination. So first and foremost, it's about how Black people can survive in this country or get out of it. That's in a nutshell, right? In a nutshell, it's basically part one is the context. And, I don't know if you remember, but I used to write a blog called Rise Up Hip Hop Nation. So a lot of those type of essays, social commentaries about race, about colonization, about, the history of this country, basically, the denial of it as well, is the first part about the context of what we're dealing with. And then the second part is called strategy matters. And that's when kind of the social network analysis and everything 360 comes in. And, intentionality. One, building your community network as strong as possible to mitigate some of the damage that we have to suffer from this larger macro structure issues, right? So building on that level first, building cooperatively as well to get out of kind of the capitalist torture that everyone has to live under. So the strategy of that, the strategy of understanding how anti-Blackness is just the foundation of this country, and how they will always choose. I mean, they pretty much, at least from what I see and what I wrote about, they'll let this whole place burn down really before they give up their anti-Blackness. Okay, so instead of like making sure everyone does well, we're just going to make sure that we exploit and so on, even if it really is unsustainable. And that's another key thing. It's about sustainability, thinking much more long-term about self-determination, and much more honestly about it, if you will, understanding the limits in social structure, understanding that social structure does limit us. So we might be anti-capitalist, but if we, put gas in a car, that's going to, also support the system at the same time, right? So it's just, being much more honest, being much more intentional, and from that point, building to what we need to build to. And for Black people in particular, and this book is for Black people in particular, understanding, as 12% or so of this society, that we're not going to see the Black self-determination we want until there's a whole cultural shift, if you will, narrative work done for the majority and the masses of this country. And if people are wanting to wait till that happens and work on that, but understand that's going to be, it's been a couple 3 generations already, it's probably going to be a couple 3 more. Or think about exit strategy type stuff and going places that we will feel less targeted.
Yeah. So we're in the middle of a pandemic right now. There's all kinds of uncertainty. How would kind of this 360 philosophy, or the practice of this kind of 360 outlook, how can we look at this in terms of applying this theory to surviving, or to being able to
Right.
improve our lots in this moment?
Right. No, this is kind of almost like we could be doing real experiments right now, right?
Yeah, right.
With how you build your 360 in a pandemic is how you can do real experience. I mean, a lot of people are just not aware of, they have their family supports or friends supports, or they go to certain, community type things so they're just not as intentional about it, right? And so one is really working on intentionality, like really down to, okay, if I can't pay rent, who do I know that I can either, get support from or go stay with, that type of thing, right? If, their community resources, researching those community resources, and I would say intentionally look more towards public than anything privatized or privately owned. So look towards putting some pressure on, local municipalities, state, and so on, to make sure that the things that we really need, utility type stuff, basic type stuff, stay public or go back public for those that are no longer, And so, understanding that, everything is politics. So you can't depend on, a political system that really doesn't care about you unless you demand it. And a lot of people don't have the luxury in a lot of ways of doing that. So but you can build it though by building strength within your network. So once you feel stronger within your network, your, people you can count on, join an organization, at least one that you will, that can do a lot of the legwork that needs to be done to put, pressure on your local municipalities and that type of thing. And yeah, just be much more aware of how power controls your life. And, a lot of people will believe that they can overcome social structure, but social structure rules our lives.
Yeah.
And so being much more understanding of that will, even I say kind of in the book, even if you decide marriage is one of the tenets of the 360 blueprint. And marriage meaning, like, remember during times of slavery where enslaved Africans would run away and form, societies, sometimes in hard to reach places like in the mountains of Jamaica or Brazil. There was a major maroon in Brazil for, I think it lasted over 100 years or so, self-determined, but always under duress because, the Portuguese and the colonizers were always trying to like end them, right? So always under duress and had to plan for that. But even if maroon, which we call today, what do they call that? Off the grid, right? Even if you go off the grid, you're taking a lot with you in terms of, things you've learned, human capital, skills that you've got from either your education or whatever. So there's no way to ever really divorce the past, divorce, the structure that we've been in. But there are ways to like divest from things that don't do well by us and invest more in things that will.
Yeah. So I'm kind of interested, like, is there like a particular math, like how many you want to go pressure the city council to do X, Y, and Z? How many people, how big does an organization need to be?
So the actual 360 blueprint for organizations is different. So for example, let me just personally, you would have your internal circle of, support network, like for material needs, if you need, right? Then outside of that, you go to your community and your businesses, your education, your media, and then your organizations for political organizations. So you should have, at least one that you're actively in and 6 or 7 others that you support just by even signing their petitions or whatever, right? But if you're an organization, the way the 360 works is obviously collaboration. So the way mine is I try to have 10 organizations in each region and connect those to each other when they need to build or do something more. And so a good example of it now would be what they call the Movement for Black Lives, which is a lot of kind of Black Lives Matter type organizations on the ground under umbrella Movement for Black Lives. And so they coordinate a lot in doing stuff like cultural narrative building work, protests when necessary, that type of thing, So even though there's one group now that has some chapters called Black Lives Matter, there's so many other groups that have been doing that work, like Dream Defenders in Florida and so on. They all fall under that category of Movement for Black Lives. And so, if you are intentional about the organizations that you support, the organizations actually do that work. They do the going to the local municipalities type stuff, and they collaborate with other organizations.
Right. So it's a question of it's a question of organizing. Organizing the organizers almost for.
Yes. So it is organizing is the key for on the personal level as well as, to get stuff done in society. You're not going to get it done without really organize type thing. But yeah, organizing the organizers more, because there's a lot of people that do similar work, but they're doing it fragmented. And when they're connected or know more about each other and have kind of that 360 network, then they'll be more powerful.
Absolutely, absolutely. So where can we find out? Where can we find out more about the developments of the book and when it'll be available and all that good stuff?
Sure, sure. So right now it's already an ebook, which this is also just again intentional. So like I don't shop at Amazon, but Kindle is Amazon, and that's where the ebook is. So these are one of the type of things, right? I went with a Inglewood Black publisher, uh, uh, um, a small Black publisher out of Inglewood called Reflection Publishing. So I'm still waiting for the final copy of the paperback, but I do will be promoting soon the paperback and wholesaling it from me basically. But it is also going to be available on Barnes and Noble, and the ebook will be available on Kindle. Is already available on Kindle.
So a big part of what we've been trying to do here at the part of this whole series is that it's been promoting like venues and small presses, independent presses. I don't know what's his name, small press, independent presses.
Right.
Can you tell us a little more about Reflections?
Yeah, so actually came out of a 360 meeting. So for the last couple years, I've had a few what were called 360 summits, where I brought together people of my network who I thought were of like mind and wanted to build these type of things. And one of the people that came to one of the summits, his name was Mel Taylor. And he and his partner, Debbie, have an independent publishing company called Reflections out of Inglewood. And that's how I found out about them. And that's why I decided to, get that way, because it really was basically 360 built. So, yeah. So, just like I said, we all have, these networks of folks that we know. Most of them are kind of weak ties. But if we become more intentional about that, we'll be able to see a lot stronger structure built in our micro levels, which again will mitigate a lot of the, macro that we have to deal with.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll drop the links down below to Reflections, as well as anything else involved with the Hip Hop Congress. Anything else? Involved with this? Are there any?
Yeah, I can also drop the link of I have a Medium page where I drop the links for the book pre-order, so I can do that. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are there any like parting words of like wisdom or something you'd like to share with us in these times?
I mean, just Public Enemy says can't trust it. I do a lot of media literacy education, and I think media literacy in the 21st century is absolutely critical. There's so much disinformation, misinformation, propaganda, all of that having, major effects on the way people think and know. So it's really, really critical to be media literate, understand the sources and, of where you're getting information and what their priorities are, if you will. I recommend always getting from multiple sources, so that way you can figure out what the framing is from each and get closer to the truth. So that would be one thing that I, say really. And then in this pandemic, more than anything, you're going to have to start building again. And start with folks that you can depend on and trust. And if you don't have people like that in your life, which a lot of people unfortunately don't, we're dealing with a lot of trauma from this history as well. Then go to the second tier, which would be community resources, public resources, and build some community that way. An organization is a great way to become part of a community. Join one.
Join one. You heard it here. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Tina Wright. This has been a real pleasure, and I'm excited.
Thank you, Matt.
I'm sure we'll be talking more in the very near future.
Yeah, thank you. Again, I appreciate the work you're doing for these. All right.